something a little bit different, but also I think quite interesting. As I mentioned earlier, I'm too, I'm also from that era of the 90s. And one of the things I remember about .com boom and bust was, a lot of companies like Akamai. I was at a company called NetApp, which was in that same era, in the same place. We were selling pickaxes to gold miners. It was,
You had a cache, you had a line of caches, and you had the
yeah.
file.
Yeah, and you rode that. You build a business on this whole industry that just disappeared overnight. 70% of NetApp's customers were gone in one day. Well, effectively, as if it was overnight. And I think like companies like NetApp and Microsoft, a lot of others, Akamai managed to get through that and even thrive after that. What was that like? I think you were still there at that time. What was it like to go through that cycle and then to pivot and take it from there?
Well, so we were already a public company, as was NetApp at the time, obviously, and it sucked. It was terrible. We had a year at Akamai where we transitioned. It was close to 100% of the business. It was not. I think it was in the 80s or low 90% of our customer base literally went away. Mm. And, you weren't going to be able to collect from surfmonkey.com after they went out of business. And they were a customer you were super excited to get when you got them because they had the prospect of being this high flying, they could be the next Yahoo. And what happened at Akamai at the time was, as was the case for many technology companies, NetApp among them, your stock gets destroyed and you do layoffs because you're worried that you're not going to be able to stay in business. And at a management and kind of, pure human level, it's pretty brutal. It's a tough time. At a business level, Akamai was able to, over the course of that year, stay basically flat revenue-wise from one year to the next, but swapping out, as I just mentioned, the vast majority of the logos that represented that revenue. And, if you exit a year flat revenue-wise, Wall Street thinks that you're a disaster and you're about to die. But if you look at a set of logos that starts with, surfmonkey.com and whatever other, companies you had there, and ends up with FedEx and, and the large scale retailers and, the established kind of not going anywhere and they're going to be around for a while companies, that's a much better, much more stable, much more a company on whose longevity you can probably bank a lot more than the one that's servicing this earlier customer base. So that year for us as a company was a year that looked flat on paper, but in fact caused us to understand how to sell into and support much more reliable, old school, old line, real businesses. Yeah. And so I think that year really, in the final analysis, positioned us to be able to address the enterprise market much, much more. Yeah. And so, those eras are, if you make it through, you make it through stronger.
Well, it's in a way, it's kind of like those .coms, those web monkeys, basically funded your R&D so that you could actually have a product that when that came, it was 100% ready to actually go to FedEx and have something that worked.
Yeah, that's right. And to their credit, those early customers who, maybe didn't survive that downturn were much more inclined to take a risk on an early stage infrastructure provider than the FedExes of the world were at the time. So yeah, for sure. I think that's actually, I'd never really phrased it that way, as those companies sort of funding our R&D, but I think it's actually kind of a nice phrase.